7 o'clock. Glad you're here. Beautiful day we've had. No better way to come to a conclusion of it, pretty much, to be here tonight. We're going to continue talking about the Judges tonight. We're going to briefly be in chapter 10. Most of our study is going to be in chapter 11 of the book of Judges. Not sure if the screen is going to work or not. This is going to work, or it may quit right in the middle of it, give them some problems. We get the word of prayer, and Bill Pennington, would you lead some prayer, please? Well, after Gideon dies, we talked a little bit about him last week. There's one by the name of Abimelech. He came in and killed 70 sons of Gideon, all but one. And we saw that last week. Well, after Abimelech sort of goes away and Gideon's dead, and we have two judges that are covered in chapter 10, Tola and Jar. And one reigned Tola there for 23 years, and Jar, he sort of judged them for 22 years. But nothing much is said about them. In the first about 3 or 4 verses there in chapter 10 is all we know about them. A couple of interesting things it says about them, but still not much takes place about them. Well, after this 45 years right here with these two judges, well, Israel goes back to the old ways. They go back to forsaking God and taking on the ways of idol worship and doing everything that God would not have them to do. And then the enemy comes in, begins to oppress them. And we find them under the enemy here, the Philistines or Amorites, any of these other individuals are making life difficult for them. And then, as they always do, they cry out to God for help, and God answers. And God sends a judge. And the judge delivers them out of the hands of the enemy. And that's where we are in chapter 11. The judge here is Jephthah. In verse 1, now Jephthah the Gileadite was a mighty man of valor, and he was a son of a harlot, and Gilead begot Jephthah. So he's going to be the new judge. But it's going to take him a little bit to get in that position. But he's going to be the next one that's going to come about. And notice here something he has against him, his mother. She's a harlot. And that's going to cause him some trouble with his other brothers. His dad was Gilead, but they had different, his mother and the other sons that are going to be there, his mother, are different. And they're going to cause a hardship on him. And verse 2 and 3, Gilead's wife bore sons, and when his wife's sons grew up, they drove Jephthah out and said to him, you have no inheritance in our father's house, for you are the son of another woman. Then Jephthah fled from his brothers and dwelt in the land of Tob, and worthless men band together with Jephthah, and he went raiding with him. So because of this mother being a harlot, the other son said, you'd have no part in this family. No part in it. Get out. We only want the true Israelites here. And they kick him out. And he gets out. And he joins up with some worthless men. How could a man of God, as he's going to be be a part of this worthless mob or gang that's going about. But that just shows you here, as we'll see, God can use anybody. He can use anybody, and He can change people. Maybe at one time He was one with these worthless individuals, but He's going to come around. So they're going about, going from place to place, robbing people, whatever they do, worthless. And but what he was doing, he was making a reputation for himself as being a pretty good warrior, a pretty good fighter, because of what he was doing. And that gets the attention here of some a little bit later in verse 4. And it came to pass after a time that the people of Ammon made war against Israel. And so it was, when the people of Ammon made war against Israel, that the elders of Gilead went to get Jephthah from the land of Tob. And they said to Jephthah, "Come and be our commander, that we may fight against the people of Ammon." So when things got tough, the one they kicked out, they go and want to bring him back in. They want some help. You got a good reputation here of fighting against the enemy. Can you come and help us as we fight against Ammon? Now, what would you do? Here, I'm sure his feelings were hurt, had to be hurt. They didn't want him around. Would you say, "Well, adios, forget about you, I'm on my own here"? Or would you go and help out, pretty much your half-brothers here? Well, Jephthah, he questions them on this in verse 7. So Jephthah said to the elders of Gilead, "Did you not hate me and expel me from my father's house? Why have you come to me now when you are in distress?" So again, he's sort of surprised that they're there. Why would you want me for your leader? You done kicked me out. But they want him there to do battle. They want to make him a leader, a commander, pretty much. If you'll help us, we will make you a commander. And that branch comes out in verse 12 and 13. Then Jephthah sent messengers to the king of the people of Ammon, saying, "What do you have against me, that you have come to fight against me in my land?" And the king of the people of Ammon answered the messengers of Jephthah, "Because Israel took away my land when they came up out of Egypt, from Arnon as far as Jabbok and to the Jordan. Now therefore restore those lands peaceably." So those people that are fighting against Israel, the Ammons, well, he asked them, "Why are you doing this?" And they said, "We want our land back. You took our land from us." And of course, that's not the case. And Jephthah is about to give them a history lesson as to how all this came about in verse 14 through 16. So Jephthah again sent messengers to the king of the people of Ammon and said to him, "Thus says Jephthah, Israel did not take away the land of Moab, nor the land of the people of Ammon. For when Israel came up from Egypt, they walked through the wilderness as far as the Red Sea and came to Kadesh." So Jephthah, he knows about the Red Sea crossing. He knows all about that. And now he's telling this king how they acquired this land. That is, Israel did. 17. Then Israel sent messengers to the king of Edom, saying, "Please let me pass through your land." But the king of Edom would not heed. And in like matter, they sent to the king of Moab, but he would not consent, so Israel remained in Kadesh. Now, all this takes place in Numbers chapter 20. Moses is wanting to cross the land of these two kings, but they wouldn't let him, and that was pretty common. They were just pretty mean back then. If you get on our land, you may try to take it from us, so they wouldn't let Moses cross. And that's in Numbers chapter 20. So Israel never took hold of this land. They just wanted to cross it. 19, verse 19. Then Israel sent messengers to Sihon, king of the Amorites, king of Heshbon. And Israel said to him, please let us pass through your land into our place. So again, they wanted to cross again some land, but these kings wouldn't let them, the Amorites. And then 23, now the Lord God of Israel has disposed the Amorites from before his people Israel. Should you then possess it? So God took care of the Amorites. He gave the land to Israel. And here, what Jephthah is doing, he's asking this king of Ammon, God has done this. It was their land, Amorites. He gave it to us. Now, why do you want it? It's not yours. It was never yours to begin with. But here they are wanting it back, which really they never had. And then Jephthah asked this king a very important question. It's verse 24. Will you not possess whatever Chemosh your God gives you to possess? So whatever the Lord our God takes possession of before us, we will possess. He's asking the king here, this of Ammon, why didn't you do this sooner? If your God gave it to him, why didn't you take it? And their God was Chemosh here that they worshiped. And it said, we're doing the same thing. The Lord God gave us this land, so therefore we're going to take hold of it. That's what any person would do if their God gave it to them. And then in verse 25, and now, are you any better than Balak, the son of Zippor, king of Moab? Did he ever strike against Israel? Did he ever fight against them? So Jephthah here tells them about the Ammonites. Do you remember what happened to Balak? How he tried to take it back. And remember, Balak was the man that tried to get Balaam to curse Israel. And Balaam went to God. God wouldn't let him do it. And Balaam, eventually, he moves in with Balak, with the enemy, and he dies there. But Jephthah is reminding this king of Ammon, remember what happened to them then? Again, he's telling them, it's not going to work out for you either if you try to take this land. You're going to be defeated as well. And then he says in verse 26, he says, while Israel dwelt in Heshbon and its villages, in Aorah and its villages, and in all the cities of the banks of Ammon, for 300 years, why did you not recover them within that time? So if this land was so important to you, you had 300 years to take it. And all of a sudden now, you're just now wanting it. And that's where the question for them is there. And we don't know why they're just now wanting it, but they're wanting it and such. And then 27, 28, therefore I have not sinned against you, but you wronged me by fighting against me. May the Lord the judge render judgment this day between the children of Israel and the people of Ammon. However, the king of the people of Ammon did not heed the words which Jephthah sent him. So this king didn't listen. And Jephthah done warned him that you can leave and you'll live, but if you stay, you're going to die. He's told him that. And the thing about this war that they're having here, it hasn't stopped in all these many, many years. Now, they're still fighting over there. And pretty much you might say they're trying to fight against Israel. And they're always wanting to get us a little more land. And every once in a while, a president will slice off a piece of Israel and give it to the enemy. And they'll quieten down for a little bit. And then they get stirred up again. And here they go fighting one another. And everything they're fighting over there now is for this little piece of land that we're looking at right here. God gave it to Israel. But these individuals, all these nations around them now, you look at all of them, they're wanting to get it back. And if they were to give it back to them, they'd start fighting among themselves, as they've always done. But right now, they're sort of teaming up with one another. because they have a common enemy. That's Israel. And there will always be turmoil and fighting in that part of the land, of the world. Always will be. And this is just another part of it. So Jephthah is ready to go to war against Ammon. And he says something here in 30 and 31 that has people wondering, and there's different thoughts about what happened here. But here's what he says. He makes a vow to God. And Jephthah made a vow to the Lord and said, if you will indeed deliver the people of Ammon into my hands, then it will be that whatever comes out of the doors of my house to meet me, when I return in peace from the people of Ammon, shall surely be the Lord's, and I will offer it up as a burnt offering. So he asked God, if you will help me to defeat Ammon, when I go back home, the first thing that comes out of my house, or through the doors of my house, I'm going to offer it as a burnt offering. If you remember the story, what was the first thing that came out of his house? His daughter. And that's in 34 and 35. When Jephthah came to his house at Mizpah, there was his daughter coming out to meet him with timbrels and dancing. And she was his only child, because besides her he had neither son nor daughter. And it came to pass when he saw her that he tore his clothes and said, alas, my daughter, you have brought me very low. You are among those who trouble me, for I have given my word to the Lord, and I cannot go back on it. So I promised God, made a vow. Whatever comes out of the house, if you let me be victorious, I offered a burnt offering. That means kill. That's what he says. He wishes he hadn't made that. Any other vow, any other vow would have worked, I guess. But he made that vow. God didn't ask him to make a vow. All he had to do is, God, help me be victorious. That'll be great. Nothing says he hadn't made a vow like this, but he did. And the daughter responds in verse 36. So she said to him, my father, if you have given your word to the Lord, do to me according to what has gone out of your mouth, because the Lord has avenged you of your enemies, the people of Ammon. So she's good with it. Hard to understand how she could be, but she is. Whatever you promise to God, you keep your word. And then the father responds, Jephthah responds to her. She talks some more to him first. Then she said to her father, let this thing be done for me. Let me alone for 2 months. I may go and wander on the mountains and bewail my virginity, my friends and I. So he said, go. And he sent her away for 2 months, and she went with her friends and bewailed her virginity on the mountains. So she wants to go grieve. Grieve that she was never able to marry, never able to have any children. And she'd be doing this for 2 months on this mountain in a state of grief. And then verse 39 and 40, she returns. And it was so at the end of 2 months that she returned to her father, and he carried out his vow with her which he had vowed. She knew no man, and it became a custom in Israel that the daughters of Israel went 4 days each year to lament the daughter of Jephthah the Gilead. Did he sacrifice her? Well, don't know. Some say yes. Some say no. There's some things that if he did, it really doesn't fit if he kept this vow. And here's some things to consider. God does not accept human sacrifice. He doesn't accept it. Even if Jephthah said, I will do this, doesn't mean that God would accept it. Doesn't mean that God would say, okay. God may very well, I think God would have stopped him. God wouldn't accept that. God only accepted proper animal sacrifices. and not just any animal will do. We know that. Only animal sacrifice. It had to be of the male. It had to be the firstborn. It couldn't be any flaw or blemish about them. And if Jephthah's daughter knew she was soon to die, it seems that she would be grieving over her life instead of her virginity. Since that would be the last thing on her mind, she'd be grieving on, I'm about to die. And not whether or not she's going to get married or have any children. That seems to be what she was more concerned about, her virginity, than that of her life. So then we have this. Jephthah, in his excitement of going to battle, made a vow with animal sacrifices in mind. That's what he had in mind. He was thinking animals will come out that door. Once his daughter came out, then he realized that his vow would have to be carried out in a different way. Her life would be devoted to God by serving him continually in the tabernacle, and by this she could never marry and never conceive children. So it may be he made the vow, he sees her, and he said, I got to rethink this thing. And here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to commit my daughter to the life in the tabernacle. She can't marry, no children, of course. So that's, some think that maybe that's what she did. It stands to reason. I would think that makes more sense, because God would not accept that sacrifice, a human sacrifice. He wouldn't do it, because he condemned all the other nations around when they offered children sacrifices. He condemned that greatly. And it made him sick to see it happen. And then in verse 38 and 39, mainly there in verse 39, where it became a custom in Israel, they would remember her. Why would you want to make a vow about killing your child? Why would you make at least a custom to remember that by, to some degree? So there's different thoughts on that as to what he actually did. So I'm going to say that pretty good thought that he just committed her to service in the tabernacle for the rest of her life. And that's what she was so sad about. I can never marry, I can never have children. That's what she'd be saddened over, and not that of her death. And there's other thoughts out there on it. So just a thought, but he made a vow without thinking. Without thinking. Now we get back to the battle. We see here he won the battle. The daughter comes out. Now in chapter 12, we're going to talk about the battle that he won. Then the men of Ephraim gathered together. Well, this is after the battle. Gathered together, crossed over towards Zaphon, and said to Jephthah, why did you cross over and fight against the people of Ammon and did not call us to go with you? We will burn your house down on you with fire. So here's Ephraim again. This is not the first time they've done this. With Gideon, when he went to battle, he defeated the enemy. And all of a sudden, Ephraim comes up and says, why didn't you wake us up? Why didn't you tell us you were going into battle? We would love to have gone with you. And then here they're using the same excuse. After the battle's over, they come to Jephthah and say, why didn't you tell us? We've been glad to go with you. But you didn't. And here's what we're going to do. We're going to burn your house down with you in it. That's what they're going to do. Well, they shouldn't be telling Jephthah that. Because Jephthah's, he's got a reputation, pretty mean guy. So here's what Jephthah says to them in verse 2. And Jephthah said to them, my people and I were in a great struggle with the people of Ammon when I called you. He did call them. He did call them to come do battle. But you did not deliver me out of their hands. So when I saw that you would not deliver me, I took my life in my hands and crossed over against the people of Ammon, and the Lord delivered them to my hand. Why then have you come up to me this day to fight against me? So the tribes are fixing to fight one another, and that's never good. That's none of this war is going to work out for them. The civil war between the tribes. So here's what Jephthah does. Verse 4. Now Jephthah gathered together all the men of Gilead and fought against Ephraim. And the men of Gilead defeated Ephraim because they said, you Gileadites are a fugitive of Ephraim among the Ephraimites and among the Manassites. So he defeated them. He went to war against his own people. And he defeated them. And one way he did this, he defeated them. And well, the Ephraim tried to go back home. We're going to go back home. They had to put the tail between their legs and get back. But Jephthah, he says, no, you're not going back so quick. And here's what he does in verse 5. The Gileadites seized the fords, that's a bridge, the fords of the Jordan before the Ephraimites arrived. And when the Ephraimites who crossed said, let me cross over, the men of Gilead would say to them, are you an Ephraimite? If they said no now, so he would ask them, are you from Ephraim? If they say, no, we're not, there's a test. He has a test to see if they were or not. And verse 6, then they would say to him, if they said no, we're not from Ephraim, then say, ever how you pronounce that word? Shibboleth. And he would say, Sibboleth. They couldn't pronounce it. They couldn't pronounce that word. That first word, Shibboleth, means the ear of corn, and the other word, with the Sibboleth, means a burden. If they couldn't pronounce it, he would kill them. And he did. And that day, he killed, during that time, 42,000 from Ephraim fell because they couldn't pronounce a certain word. And that pretty much ends the judge here, Jephthah. He brought Israel back. He killed a lot of them on his own people because of the way they treated him. If they had not treated him that way that they did in the very beginning, treated him like a brother, it may very well be that they would be alive at this time, those of Ephraim. But they didn't want him in their sight. He goes off. He makes something of himself. He's been a great warrior and delivers Israel, defeats the enemy, and defeats a lot of those of Ephraim, that one tribe. So there's another judge and how he delivered Israel at this same time. Anything on this judge? All right. We'll take up the next time the next judge and what they do, what he does, through the whole book. All right, about time for the bell.